Hello. In access control systems, the reader, no matter how controversial it may seem at first glance, is one of the most important components. It is the only element of the system that many ordinary users interact with on a daily basis. How well the reader fits into the interior of the space, and how convenient it is for each employee to interact with it directly affects the perception of the system as a whole. That is why, when designing the Sigur MR100, we paid special attention to its design as well as the capabilities of light sound indication. At present, their implementation provides the best user experience when interacting with the reader. Technically, this became possible due to the use of the following solutions. A multicolor LED indicator that allows for fine-tuning the visual representation of the reader's response to system events. The user will have a wide selection of color palettes and the ability to customize dynamic color changes. And the second is the broadband acoustic speaker, which allows for high-quality playback of various sound responses, including user sound tracks. Before configuring the reader's responses, it is important to understand how it will be connected to the access control system. The completeness of the list of events that it can respond to directly depends on this. To be more specific, let's open the client program and go to the File menu, then Settings, and Indication. The first thing that will open before us is the Profiles tab. As we can see, there are already a number of preset indication profiles here. However, let's not focus on that for now and create a new one by clicking on the plus icon. The parameters are on the right side of the window. Select the profile type. As I mentioned earlier, depending on the connection interface and the selected profile type, the set of possible events that the reader can respond to will vary. For example, let's choose the profile type reader and Sigur controller. To begin with, let's consider the LED indication of the reader in a standby state. In other words, this is how the reader will behave when no events are occurring. Two options are available. Constant light, where the color of the LED does not change until an event occurs, and the blinking occurs when the reader changes the color of the LED. First, color 1 is on for a specified duration, then color 2 is on for the set time. Now let's consider the events that the reader can respond to in a specified manner. We will start with the block of internal and service events of the reader. The identifier has been read. The reaction is triggered when an identifier is brought close to the reader and successfully read. Reader on the wall. Reaction when the reader is mounted on the wall panel. Reader detached. Reaction when the reader is removed from the wall panel. If the temperature of the reader exceeds the normal limits, a reaction set for the event of temperature out of range is triggered. If the power supply voltage of the reader exceeds normal limits, a response is triggered. It is important to note that reactions to internal service events of the reader can be triggered regardless of the interface through which the reader is connected to the controller. The reader is already equipped with a standard indication profile at the time of production. For example, when the device is connected only to the power source, it can already respond to internal events such as being detached from the wall panel. To illustrate, let's remove the reader from its base and see how it reacts. When connecting the reader via the Wiegand interface, its indications can be controlled through special digital inputs. In software, they are IN1, IN2, and IN3. These are for blue, brown, and yellow wires. In general, these inputs can be used in the Sigur MR100 to configure indications in various scenarios. However, IN1 is most often used for access grant reactions, IN2 for denial, and IN3 for any additional event that activates the reader's beeper. Now let's consider the event block of the controller. All these events can be reproduced by the reader when it is connected via the OSDP interface. It is not necessary to use its digital inputs IN1, IN2, and IN3, which were mentioned earlier, as the controller will be able to communicate all the necessary events to the reader using only two lines, A and B. In addition to the responses available when using digital inputs, connecting via OSDP allows for the reproduction of other responses. Awaiting passage, the reaction when an employee gets access, and the controller is waiting for them to pass through the access point. Or the alarm of the security loop, the response to the alarm event from the security loop of the Sigur E2 or E4 controller. It is worth noting the priority parameter separately. It determines whether the indication of the reader's response will change when another response occurs. For example, if the access grant response is set with a priority of 15 and the access denial response with a priority of 10, then in the case where a denial of access is registered in the system, when a card that has been entered into the system is presented to the reader, the denial indication will be interrupted and the access grant indication will be played, as it has a higher priority according to our setting. For each of the events we have just become acquainted with, you can configure your response, specifying how exactly the reader will react to a given event. To configure your response or to familiarize yourself with the parameters of the already pre-installed responses, let's go to the Sigur Reader Responses tab. All predefined responses of the readers from standard profiles are presented here. Let's take a closer look at what constitutes the reader's response. To do this, we will create several new reactions, for example, for the events of waiting for passage and the alarm of the security loop, and we will name them accordingly. All reactions of the reader consist of two blocks. Visual indication. Here we can choose how the reader will respond to a given event by changing the color of its LED. Let's choose to flash several times and set the colors and their duration, as well as set the number of repetitions for the color changes. The second block is sound indication. Here, in the drop-down menu, we can select the soundtrack that will be played by the reader when a specified event occurs. We can also adjust the number of repetitions of the melody and the pause between them. Overall, the list of preset melodies is quite extensive. For a number of events for which reactions are possible in the system, we have pre-prepared audio tracks, adapting them in terms of duration, tone, and other parameters. For a number of events, we have also voiced them using a speaker in two languages, Russian and English. However, if the standard sounds are not enough, there is an option to upload your own melody in WAV, AIF, or AU format with a duration of up to 45 seconds. This is exactly our case. Let's upload melodies for the selected responses. To do this, let's go to the Sounds tab, click the plus button, and select the desired melody. After loading, it will be displayed in the list of available melodies. Here, if necessary, you can listen to it. Let's complete the configuration by adding the required melody for the waiting for passage event. We create a response for the security loop alarm and set the settings for visual and auditory indications. Thus, the set of all the settings we just discussed can be saved as an indication profile. Let's return to the beginning of our narrative on the tab of the same name. To demonstrate the customization capabilities, let's create a new profile. But to avoid starting from scratch, select one of the standard options and copy its parameters by pressing the button. Previously, we configured two new responses that can complement our new profile. These will be the response to waiting for passage and the alarm of the security loop. Now let's upload our indication profile to the reader. This can be done in two ways. The first is to upload the indication configuration file using the Sigur Settings application installed on an Android smartphone. The file can be attached to an email and sent to a specified email address using Sigur, or saved to a computer and then transferred to a smartphone using alternative methods. I will choose the second option, save the file, and transfer it to my smartphone. After we have uploaded the file to the smartphone, we will open the Settings application and select the desired reader from the list. Then we will select the Update Indication Configuration option and click on the relevant file. At the app's request, we will enter the service password. It is Sigur. Let's wait for loading finish. Now the reader will be ready to work with the indication profile we have configured. The second option is to upload the indication profile using the client program through the OSDP interface. Please note that this method is relevant only in cases where the Sigur reader is connected to the Sigur controller via the OSDP interface. In other words, this capability is a distinctive feature of the SSDP protocol, allowing for the centralized update of the indication profile on readers connected to a single controller from a workstation. To do this, we will go to the Equipment tab. We will select the access point and open the settings. Next, go to the Devices tab. Then, for the required port of the controller, you need to press the Change Indication Profile button. Select the indication profile we created from the drop-down list, which needs to be uploaded to the reader. Then, we will click the Apply button. After these actions, the process of uploading the indication profile to the reader will begin. The upload of the indication profile occurs in the background and may take a considerable amount of time. During the upload, the Change Indication Profile button will be changed to the informational message profile is loading and will be inactive. It is important to note that during the update process, the system continues to function, read cards, display indications, etc. To track the process of updating the indication profile, card reading profile, or firmware of the reader through the SSDP protocols in the client program, a system event log is provided. The events log can be viewed by clicking the Show System Events Log button located on the Equipment tab. This button appears automatically if there is at least one event. Indication Profile Upload. Indication profile successfully uploaded to the reader appears in the system event log. Once the indication profile upload is complete, the reader will be ready for operation. The last thing left to do is to test it. Before we begin testing, I would like to remind you that our main goal as developers is to make the system's behavior clear and predictable for the user, so that at any moment during its operation, whether an event occurs or additional action is expected, the user clearly understands what is happening and what is required of them. In general, for the system to communicate with the user in the same language, we present the cards. Access denied, the reader responds negatively. And we bring up another card. Access granted. Next, we will test more complex access schemes. Waiting for the second card with access logic requiring 2 people, and waiting for the breathalyzer test. We present the card. Waiting for the second card. We present the second card. Access granted.
Access allowed.
Another logic is the waiting for the breathalyzer test. The breathalyzer is waiting for the exhale. We exhale. Access granted. And lastly, this is also our custom reaction. Let's see how the reader will respond to the activation of the security loop on the controller. When the alarm is de-escalated, the response ceases. Well, this also concludes our testing. I hope this short video guide will be useful in setting up the system for your tasks. Thank you for your attention and goodbye.